Well, as I begin the sermon this morning, I have some props that I want to show you. This is a special day. Now, for you that are visiting with us, not every church has a pastor that will bring props like what I got. Okay. We've got frosted strawberry Pop-Tarts. We have got a Diet Coke. And we have got super glue. Now, I got to tell you something. You in North Highlands, you are blessed to have a pastor that will bring such props to the service. I'll get back to those in just a little bit. We want to begin in Matthew chapter number 22. Now, we're in the midst of our series from the book of Exodus. And we are in the midst of talking about the Ten Commandments. And we'll get to the Ten Commandments. But first, I want to start with Matthew chapter 22. Beginning with verse number 37, where Jesus said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets." Last week, we talked about the fact that Jesus said that the most important thing in our life was to love God. And now we read that Jesus says that the second great commandment is to love your neighbor. I read a little story. A wife was fussing at her husband, and I know none of you husbands, your wife would ever fuss at you. But in this little make-believe story, a wife was fussing at her husband and said, "Steve, our neighbors that moved in next door seem to be such a loving couple. Each morning when he leaves for work, he kisses her goodbye. And every evening when he gets home, he gives her a big hug. Why can't you do that?" Steve replied, "Well, okay, but I hardly know her." That is not exactly what the Bible's talking about when it tells us to love our neighbor. That may get you a little bit of trouble, fellas, if you do that. But what does it mean to love our neighbor? Now, last week we read the first four commandments, and we went over the first four commandments, and we talked about how Jesus was talking about the commandments, and really I believe that what he was referencing, and there's a whole bunch of commandments, we talked about that as well, but probably the best place to start as far as showing God, once we're a believer, once we receive the gift of his Son as our Savior, once we do that, the best way perhaps to start showing God that we really do love him is by obeying the first four commandments. Likewise, we're commanded to love our neighbor. And there's a lot of things that we should do to love our neighbor. There's a lot of instructions in the scripture. But probably the best place to start is by following commandments number 5 through 10. And so this morning I want to quickly go through commandments number 5 through 10, those last 6 commandments. And then I want to share with you 3 points from our wonderful 3 props. Excuse me. So first I want to go through these commandments pretty quickly. Number 5, honor your father and your mother. Exodus chapter 20 says, verse number 12, honor your father and your mother, and that your days may be long upon the land which the Lord your God has given you. If you have good parents, number 1, if you have or had good parents, you should thank God. And if you have good parents or you had good parents, this commandment should be pretty easy to follow. If you have parents that love you and care for you, then it shouldn't be hard for you to love and care for them. If you have good parents that have been there for you and parents who have sacrificed for you, then when the time comes and maybe the tables are turned and your parents need you to care for them and your parents need you to even sacrifice for them, it shouldn't be very hard to do. If you have parents that loved you and were basically good parents, then for you to fulfill this commandment should be easy. I mean, if you have parents that have been there for you, given to you, loved you, protected you, helped you, raised you, nurtured you, if you have those type parents, then to honor them is something that should be easy. If you can't honor a good parent, man, there's something really wrong with you. But some of you didn't have good parents. Some of you don't have good parents. And that makes following this commandment a whole lot harder. But although it may be hard to even honor a bad parent, and that may be something that is very difficult, even something that you don't want to do, we have to understand that this is not a suggestion. This is a commandment. To honor our father and our mother is not a suggestion. It's not qualified by the fact whether your parents were good to you or not, whether they loved Jesus or not, whether they truly were the best mom and dad in the world or not. We're commanded to honor our father and our mother. Commandment number 6, you shall not murder. Exodus verse number 13. You shall not murder. So the question is it always sin to kill somebody? The answer is obviously no. It's not always a sin to take someone else's life. Let me give you a verse. One example is found in Exodus chapter 22, verse number 2. If a thief is found breaking in, and he is struck so that he dies, there shall be no guilt for his bloodshed. If somebody comes into your house, just to be blunt, if somebody comes into your house and they got a gun and they're going to rape your wife or your kids, and you shoot them, good for you. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not against Scripture. There are other examples in the Bible. The Bible also, of course, God led the army of Israel into many battles to kill many people. There's bloodshed all throughout the Old Testament where God led the army of Israel. And so we thank God on Memorial Day, man. We thank God for the men and women who have served our country. Many of them, and we celebrated on Memorial Day, died for our freedom, but many of them also had to kill somebody for our freedom. That's just a fact. Also, the Bible also allows for capital punishment in the case of certain crimes. And so the killing or the murder that is commanded for us here to avoid is the taking of an innocent life. It is sin for us to murder someone, to kill somebody out of our own jealousy or out of greed or out of some kind of rage. It's a sin for us to kill someone, and it's breaking the 6th commandment for us to kill somebody because, we're out of control due to alcohol or due to drugs. It's the taking of an innocent life that's the sin. And by the way, who could be more innocent than a little baby in the mother's womb? Abortion is absolutely breaking commandment number 6. Commandment number 7. Commandment number 7, you shall not commit adultery. Look at verse number 14. You shall not commit adultery. I have heard about every excuse in the world why people have sex outside of marriage. I've heard excuses that single people give, and I wrote down a few of them, and these are excuses that I've heard. And they include, well, it doesn't mean anything, we're just having fun. Well, everybody is doing it. Well, we love each other. Well, we're planning on getting married anyway. And I've heard several older adults that are in relationships, and they say, well, they can't afford to get married because they have certain sets of retirement or Social Security or this, that, and the other thing. And they say, well, we can't afford to get married. If we got married, we would lose the man's, some of his money or some of the woman's money. Every excuse you could think of. Excuses that married couples use, that married people use, include, well, our marriage is basically over anyway. Well, my wife has no passion and she's checked out of the marriage. My husband, he's mean and he treats me like dirt. Or even the excuse that everybody's doing it. Let me tell you something. It doesn't matter. Listen to me. It doesn't matter what age you are. It doesn't matter what kind of relationship you're in. It doesn't matter what excuse you want to use. It doesn't matter what kind of rationale you want to use. It doesn't matter how much you want to reason it. It doesn't matter if Dr. Phil or Oprah or anybody else says it's okay. It doesn't matter if your neighbors think it's fine, if your parents think it's fine. It doesn't matter if your children. None of that matters. Let me spell it out for you. If you are not married to them, you should not have sex with them. It's that simple. Don't forget about, well, I'm 17 and everybody does it. Well, I'm 22 and we're going to get married anyway. Well, I'm 52 and I'm old enough to do what I want. If you are not married to them, you should not have sex with them. I don't know how else to say it plainer than that. Point blank, there it is. It is breaking commandment number 7. Number 8, you shall not steal. Verse 15, you shall not steal. If it's not yours, leave it alone. If it's not yours, leave it alone. That kind of goes with number 7 too, doesn't it? If it ain't yours, if it ain't yours, leave it alone. Number 9, you shall not bear false witness. Verse number 16. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. Now hear me. You can say things that are true and it still be a sin. You can say something that is the truth. You can speak something that is the truth. You can put something that is on Facebook that is 100% true, but it still be sin. Sometimes the gossip, the backbiting, the sowing discord among the brethren, the purposefully hurting someone's feelings. Sometimes those things that we speak and that we do and that people that are cowards put on Facebook, those things may absolutely be true, but they're still absolutely sin for us to gossip or for us to backbite. It's still sin. So you can say something that's true and it still be sin. But one thing all the time, absolutely, without exception, is true, and that is, if it is not the truth, don't say it. If it's not the truth, don't say it. And then number 10, you shall not covet. Exodus chapter 20, verse 17. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, nor his maidservant, his female servant, nor his ox, nor his donkey, nor anything that is your neighbor's. Webster's dictionary defines covet as to desire what belongs to another inordinately or culpably. Basically, we begin to covet when we are not content with what the Lord has given us. When we are not content with our place, when we are not content with the blessings that God has bestowed upon us, and we begin to, out of greed, desire what someone else has, that is covetousness, and that is sin. So that leads us to our 3 props and the 3 points that I want to make this morning. Point number 1, we have all failed. We have all failed. If I only ever preached what I had mastered, I perhaps would never preach a sermon. I would be a hypocrite if I stood behind this podium. If I went up and I stood behind this podium and I said Sunday after Sunday after Sunday, hey, I want to tell you about something that I have mastered, something that I have complete control over, something that I have never done in my life. If I were to preach that way, I would absolutely be a hypocrite because it would not be true. I'm telling you that most of the things that I preach behind the pulpit are things that sometimes I have failed. We have all failed. Now that leads us to our Pop-Tarts. Now I know you're wondering what in the world Pop-Tarts have to do with failing. Brother Carl and I, we've worked off and on together for 16, 17 years. Several years ago, it was my birthday fell on a Sunday. So I came to church and somebody came up to me and said, Pastor Joe, happy birthday. And they gave me a box of Pop-Tarts for my birthday. Now I gotta tell you, I appreciated the box of Pop-Tarts. I really did. I was grateful that, number one, they remembered my birthday. I mean, most members don't remember it's my birthday. They don't care. Number two is I was glad that they gave me something. Most members don't give me anything for my birthday, so I was glad they gave me something. Number three is there's nothing I've ate in my life more for breakfast than strawberry frosted Pop-Tarts. This is good stuff right here, man, I'm telling you. And so I genuinely, honest to goodness, I appreciated that gift. The next day, Monday morning, I went into Brother Carl's office, and I said, hey, Pastor Carl, guess what? I said, yesterday, so-and-so, and Carl tells you it's absolutely 100% true. I went into Carl's office and I said, yesterday, so-and-so gave me a box of strawberry frosted Pop-Tarts for my birthday. Carl had this grin come across his face. It was more like a smirk. And he started to chuckle. Like, what's so funny? He said, well, yesterday, that same person came up to me and said, Brother Carl, I want you to know how much I appreciate you. And out of the blue, they handed me a $100 bill. If I'm lying, I'm dying. Brother Carl, absolute truth, isn't it? It's absolute truth. I'm like, my birthday, they give me a box of Pop-Tarts and they give you a $100 bill? I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm like, here, these are your Pop-Tarts, give me my $100. I was not a happy camper. I know that I broke commandment number 10. I know I broke commandment number 10. I wanted to break commandment number 8 and steal the $100. There may have been a couple commandments on up that I broke too, but we won't talk about that. My point is, I broke commandment number 10. I was totally satisfied, honest to goodness. I appreciated the strawberry frosted Pop-Tarts. I appreciated the gesture. I appreciated the thought. I appreciated getting something that I like, and that's awesome. But then when I compared it to what he got, I broke commandment number 10. So I say that just to say we have all failed. And I know that that's kind of funny, but it's still the truth. I broke this commandment. We have all failed. And number 2, we have all struggled. Got your Diet Coke. We have all failed and we have all struggled. Man, things have sure changed since I was a child. Back when I was a kid, some of you will remember this, and back when some of you were my age, I tell you what, you did not have soda pops in your refrigerator. My kids probably don't know what in the world it is. It's a funny story in my family. There was one time years ago, we got generic sodas, and we put them in the fridge, and sure enough, my son Nathan, he said, Mom, Dad, are we really that poor? That's the honest truth. We still joke about that. My kids don't know what it's like not to have soda pop in the refrigerator. Back when we were kids, you know what? Your mother would go to the store. She'd pay 20 cents or 15 cents for a little packet of Kool-Aid, and she'd mix it with water, stick it make it in a pitcher, stick it in the fridge. If you were thirsty, that's what you drank. You drank Kool-Aid. How many were with me? That's what you drank. And there wasn't no coming inside. There wasn't any coming inside to grab 2 or 3, soda pops out of the fridge for you and your friends. Matter of fact, you didn't even come inside to drink. You drank out of the hose. Your backyard or something. Now, some of y'all think I'm kidding. How many of you drank out of a hose all the time? Yeah. Some of you that are younger, you think I'm not joking at all. You drank Kool-Aid out of a pitcher, or you drank water out of a hose. One of those two things, that's what you drank. But actually, when there was something else that I drank when I was younger, actually my favorite drink when I was growing up was milk. Even all the way through high school, I drank milk. One summer, I got a job at a Coca-Cola plant. And actually, I worked at this plant with Kevin Ham, the pastor at Gardendale. He and I worked as a summer job at a Coke plant. And it was hot It was hot. It was in a tin roof metal thing, and there was no air. It was so hot. The job was hard. But one of the benefits of working at this Coke plant was they gave us all the soda that we wanted for free. And so I went from drinking 1 or 2 Pepsis a week, just 1 or 2 Pepsis every week, to drinking 6 or 7 Diet Cokes every day. And I drank 6 or 7 Diet Cokes every day for the next 20 years. That's all I drank, Diet Coke. Nobody. I'd go hiking, and I'd have Diet Coke in my backpack, honest truth. I had to have Diet Coke. I'd go over to somebody's house for dinner. I'd bring me a Diet Coke. I'd go to a church picnic. I'd have me a Diet Coke somewhere, and I drank Diet Coke. It's 99% of what I drank for 20-something years. About 11 or 12 years ago, I decided I wanted to give up caffeine. So one morning I woke up, and after drinking 7 or so Cokes every day for 20-something years, I didn't have one. By the end of the day, I was like, woo, my head was hurting, and I just couldn't wait. I mean, I knew it was going to be a struggle, but I didn't know it was going to be that big of a struggle. And I just couldn't wait that first night to go to bed, because I knew when I woke up the next morning, I'd feel good, after not having caffeine. Next day, I woke up, and that second day without caffeine, after 20-something years of nothing but caffeine, I thought my head was going to explode. I mean, literally explode. I thought it was like a balloon that was ready to pop. I was in so much pain, it was unbelievable. The third day, it was even worse. The third day, I was like a zombie. I was like a zombie, and the third day, I couldn't go to work. I couldn't function, and I'm like, this is insanity. And so I was determined. I got a little bit of a stubborn streak in me, and I was determined. The more I struggled, the more pain it was, the harder it was, the worse my head felt, the more determined I was to beat this caffeine addiction. About day number 4, I started feeling better. About day number 5, feeling even better. It took me 7 days. But now I haven't had caffeine, coffee, tea, soda, chocolate. I haven't had caffeine in about 12 years. I don't say that story in order to try to get everybody to give up caffeine. That's not my point. My point is that you have something in your life that you need to give up. And you try to give it up. It's going to be a struggle. Could be caffeine. Could be nicotine. Could be pornography. Could be alcohol. It could be just a foul, gossipy mouth. If you determine that you want to be better, and you think this is going to help you be better, and you say that I'm going to try to give this up, I am just telling you that you are going to struggle. And it being hard and being a struggle does not make you weak. It just makes you human. And you decide tomorrow that you're not going to drink alcohol again. You get up tomorrow and you decide you're not going to smoke again. You get up tomorrow and you decide that you've been addicted to pornography and you're not going to look at that garbage anymore. You get up tomorrow and you make that decision. I'm telling you, it is going to be a struggle. And you are going to feel weak. But that's okay. You're just being human. I'm telling you, we have all failed. And I'm telling you that we have all struggled to keep God's commandments. That gives us to point number 3. Point number 3, we all have hope. We all have hope, and that brings us to our super glue. It brings us to our super glue. Perhaps you're here and you know that you've broken some of the commandments of God. And you're wondering if it's too late to do anything about it. You're wondering if it's too late to put the pieces of your life back together. We've been studying here in Exodus chapter number 20. It's kind of cool. In Exodus chapter number 20, God gave Moses the 10 Commandments, and we've been studying that. We mentioned this last week. As we get over just a few chapters over, we get over to Exodus chapter 32. We're in Exodus 20. Exodus chapter 32, Moses sees that the people have made a golden calf, and the people are worshiping at the feet of this golden calf. The people are breaking the commandments of God. And you may know this in Exodus chapter 32, because the people were spiritually breaking the commandments of God, Moses got so frustrated that Moses did what? He literally broke the commandments of God. The commandments of God were written on these tablets of stone, and when Moses saw that the people were so quickly breaking the commandments, Moses threw the tablets down and they smashed into pieces. So in Exodus chapter number 20, God writes the commandments. In Exodus chapter number 32, Moses breaks the commandments because of the people's sin. But then we get over to Exodus chapter number 34. And do you know what God does in Exodus chapter 34? God writes them again. In Exodus chapter number 34, God says, there's hope. I know you've broken them, but there's hope. And the reason God wrote them again is explained in Exodus chapter 34, verse number 6. The Lord God, merciful and gracious, long-suffering and abounding in goodness and truth. And there's where this super glue comes in. God is merciful and gracious, and he has the power to put your life back together. God is long-suffering and abounds in goodness, and he has the ability to make you whole again. This morning, we have all failed. This morning, we have all struggled. But this morning, we all have hope. We have hope in God that he can put the pieces of our life back together.